Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is now serving as acting Attorney General after President Trump yesterday fired Pam Bondi. Her removal as the country's top prosecutor comes after criticism over her leadership at the DOJ and its handling of the Epstein files, among other things. The Wall Street Journal reports that the president fired Bondi Wednesday morning when the two were in the presidential limousine on the way to the Supreme Court. Bondi told an associate that Trump said to her, quote, "I think it's time." She reportedly asked if she could keep her job until the summer, but the president said no. Trump had already decided earlier in the week that he was going to replace her. The Journal first reported in January that the president had been increasingly unhappy with Bondi for failing to successfully prosecute his perceived political enemies. By the way, not the role of the Department of Justice. He was also frustrated over her handling of the Epstein files release. Bondi is expected to officially leave DOJ in about a month, again, according to the Wall Street Journal. And President Trump is considering a number of candidates to replace Bondi, among them EPA head Lee Zeldin, who's being seen right now as a frontrunner for the nomination. Zeldin is a former congressman from New York, ran for governor there, fell short. He's also been a close ally of the president. For people familiar with the situation tell us here at MS Now several other names have been floated for this role, including Jeanine Pirro, who's apparently pitching herself for the job. She's currently serving as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Another name in the running is Republican Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri, who previously served as Attorney General in his home state, has been outspoken in his support for the administration. And Alina Habba, the former personal lawyer to President Trump, also named as a possible successor. Last year, a judge disqualified her as U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. And Bondi may be leaving her role as Attorney General, but House lawmakers are still demanding she testify under oath about the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer issued that subpoena for Bondi's testimony last month. It followed a bipartisan vote compelling her to appear before the panel. After the news of her ousting, the top Democrat on that committee, Congressman Robert Garcia, shared a statement reading in part, "Bondi will not escape accountability and remains legally obligated to appear before our committee under oath." He got some backup from Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who was one of those that forced the vote on the subpoena in the first place. She wrote in a statement, quote, "My subpoena still stands. I did it by name, not as the sitting Attorney General." Still, a spokesperson for Comer was more noncommittal, saying he will, quote, "speak with Republican members and the DOJ about the status of the deposition subpoena and confer on next steps." By the way, Comer was never truly committed to April 14th as the date, which is when the testimony is currently scheduled for, at least right now. A lot for us to dig into with Politico White House reporter Alex Gangitano. Alex, looks like the Dow fell below 50,000.
Right.
What do you think was the final straw here for Pam Bondi? I think there's really a potpourri of options to choose from.
There really is. I mean, we know that this role was so personal to the president. Out of basically every cabinet role, he selected Pam Bondi as someone who was going to prosecute his political enemies. He went in with, you know, a list of people that he wanted his attorney general to go after. And Pam Bondi was the person that he chose to do just that. The handling of the Epstein files is, of course, something that this president has been trying to run away from since the campaign, since the very beginning. And her handling of it, that clip from the hearing that she was talking about the Dow, she was clearly frustrated with Democrats. She didn't know what else to even say to talk about this issue. We know this president watches hearings extremely closely. That's exactly what happened with former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Mm-hmm. She did not do well in that hearing. She stumbled over things, and the president was watching. And in this case, too, he's been watching since day one of how she handles these situations. But I think just the personal aspect of it, that she hasn't come in and we're seeing people in jail that the president wants in jail for reasons that he has in his head. Just the fact that there hasn't been a total mass exodus of Democrats that he wants to see taken down, that he said, this is your time. He let her go for a full year. They want to look like this is a cohesive cabinet, that there isn't a bunch of shakeups. And now here they are 15 months in.
And yet we'll talk about if there's a bigger one coming here, because you've seen the ouster of Noem, you see the ouster of Bondi now. And I think the question we were asking after Noem is, it wasn't a shakeup because the department was in chaos, even though the department was in chaos and quite publicly being rebuked for that, including but not limited to border officials having shot 2 American citizens on the ground in Minneapolis others being injured in cities like Chicago and elsewhere because of aggressive immigration enforcement tactics. The question at the time was, OK, is Markwayne Mullin going to be any different? And so I think we're again forced to ask that question when it comes to DOJ, which, by the way, their role, as much as the president would like it to be so, is not to prosecute perceived political enemies. And the reason that that's been going slowly is because the evidence is non-existent or too thin. That's what grand juries have been saying all along. I digress. When you look at the list of names who could be in the running, do they make any tangible difference in how DOJ is run?
Right. I don't think we're in a Mullin versus Noem situation that things needed to be shaken up. Things were so severe going into this. And these names are all people that are very close with the president that he knows will do his bidding. I mean, we saw, if you go back to President Biden's administration, he did not want to be seen with Attorney General Garland.
Yep.
Physically, logistically, we're not together. Meanwhile, we saw just last month Bondi and President Trump together at Graceland, walking around. Like every event, they were together. They were in that limo on the way to the Supreme Court when so much happened. So he wants someone who's personally close with him like that. We know that Eric Schmidt is somebody, when Mullin was headed out of the Senate, the White House looks to him as, OK, he's another guy who can do what Mullin did for us, which is go on TV, defend the administration, talk to the press for us. Lee Zeldin, someone that the president has been eyeing for an elevated role for quite some time. That's typically is a position that he's seen the EPA as. Let's have them on the inside circle, and they're kind of a runner-up for whatever we need. He's also kind of like a Mullin. He's young. He is independently wealthy. He has a lot of the same kind of attributes. He probably could get through a confirmation process. That's really another issue here.
Yes.
Could Elena Habba get through a confirmation process in a way that a Senator Schmidt or former Congressman Zeldin could? And so they know that they're up against very tight margins to do that.
Yeah, I think the confirmation piece is obviously one, when I put my Capitol Hill correspondent hat on, that I look at immediately, because what they benefited from with Mullin was the fact that it's hard for his colleagues to vote against him. Right. And I wonder if it wouldn't be the same dynamic for someone like a Senator Schmidt, which you could keep this person as acting. We saw it during the Biden administration. That is something you could do. But I also think that this administration would prefer to have as little grounds for, we'll say, retribution from people trying to sue them for various actions. That's one of the things that felled Alina Habba in the end. Right. I think the confirmation battle is critical. But then, of course, after Bondi's ouster, we have to ask the question, could other top administration officials be in jeopardy of losing their jobs? And in fact, several people familiar with the White House's plans have told The Atlantic there are active discussions about others leaving the administration, including FBI Director Kash Patel, Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll, and Labor Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer, whose scandals have really flown under the radar. Mm-hmm. Those people noted the timing for any removal is uncertain and that President Trump hasn't yet made up his mind. A White House spokesperson responded to The Atlantic's reporting, writing, President Trump has the most talented cabinet and team in American history. Patriots like Kash Patel, Chavez-DeRemer, and Driscoll are tirelessly implementing the president's agenda and achieving tremendous results for the American people. And yet, they still might get fired anyway.
Right. And these are people that we have had our eye on for a while. Are the floodgates now open? Did former Secretary Kristi Noem open those floodgates, which that was such a clear why the president wanted her out? Now we saw Attorney General Pam Bondi not as clear exactly what the final straw was. So now has this opened up that there doesn't need to be a final straw? Labor Secretary Chavez Ramirez was somebody who's been on our radar for those personal scandals for a long time. How much does the president care about her having a personal scandal? It's unclear, but we know he doesn't like those distractions. Of course, Kash Patel has been on our radar after Dan Bongino left the administration. Is now his time up. The, Epstein files, all of that he was part of that kind of old guard of let's get him and nothing has really happened. How does the MAGA base feel about someone like a Kash Patel? Another one on our radar is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. We know the president personally wants him around. He loves having him around, but that others in the administration don't feel as much. So how much can they get in someone's ear or in the president's ear and say, maybe it's Lutnick's time?
I think you're just also forced to ask, why do this now? Is the war in Iran conversation so bad that you need to turn the page? Or do you just want to lend more to the idea of the chaos that this White House is having to deal with, in many cases of its own making? Politico White House reporter Alex Gangitano, a big news day on your beat. Thank you.